practices were, what the, sorry, what is RJ, what it isn't, and helping them develop the systems to put in place so that every student, every staff member would have exposure to restorative practices for when harm has occurred, right? The idea of using restorative practices to resolve harm is that's very significant, but primarily on how to develop relationship and community, right? The idea for me and for the schools that I work with is that we can do a lot of the training and exercises and facilitation to address harm when it's happened. But unless we're developing and establishing strong communities and relationships, those things are still going to continue to happen. So how do we hold community is really what we were working towards. So I ended up leaving Seeds after about a year and a half, and I went to go work for Berkeley High School. So if you guys have driven by the campus, it's quite large. It's an interesting place. I don't know if any of you have been there as a student or just passed by. It's interesting. And I was tasked with developing Berkeley High's whole restorative practice system. And I'm happy to say we were able to do so. One significant situation that happened that we were able to really utilize the new systems. I think it was in 2017, there was a large incident of harm. And what happened was some students' private Instagram account came out, and there was a lot of like racist, bigoted imagery and statements that were on there, and the whole community was hurt. I mean, this made it on the news, and if you type in Berkeley High racist Instagram account, you can find all the details about it. But the reason why I'm sharing this with you is that after about a year or so of strong implementation, strong education around restorative practices and community building, we were able to support the school, student, and community to come together, people who are really hurt by what happened, and even the students who were responsible for the harm. We were able to get everyone into the same space and hold circle, and through dialogue, really come to an understanding and resolution. It wasn't easy. There was many, many different steps that had to have happened before we got to that place. But by the end of it, we had students leading circles. We had, parents engaging, teachers. It was really great. So that's just one big example of what we were dealing with. On the day-to-day, whether it's Berkeley High or even in my current school that I'm at, we're really finding ways to utilize restorative practices and ideas every single day, whether that's supporting teachers and leading community building circles and activities, helping students to lead their own circles, or we're dealing with harm. So, right, we have cases of cyberbullying, we have incidences of sexual harm, sexual harassment. We even mediate sometimes conversations between two friends who've had a falling out. So there's different ways to really utilize the various restorative practices, whether it's circle, conflict resolution meetings, mediations, we call them sometimes. And that's just a good summary of what the day-to-day looks like. Currently, I am the Dean of Students for a high school in East Oakland, Leadership Public Schools. And unfortunately, I've only been there for about a month or so, and then COVID happened. So, I've been working from home on the computer, and so I haven't really had a significant amount of time to really develop relationships with the school and the students and really begin the work that I was tasked to do. But we just started opening up schools, so I'm ready to get back to work. So I said a lot there. I think we're going to probably hold off on questions for a second, or should we ask if there's any questions now, Julie? Is that fine?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Cool. Are there any questions so far? I know I said a lot. Are any of you interested in working with young people or schools as it relates to restorative justice, restorative practices? Cool. Well, if you are, we are here. Okay. Am I saying it right? Is it Caro? Or?
Yeah, Caro.
Okay, cool. Yeah, go ahead.
So right now I'm majoring in legal studies and minoring in education. And I'm very passionate about education, and I'm very passionate about abolition. And I'd never heard of restorative justice before or actually like learned and understood what it was until I signed up for Julie's class, and it's just I feel like it's just completely changed me. And like we're right now we're also working with as interns for different restorative justice like programs and groups. And right now I'm working with impact justice, and just like the reality of implementing restorative justice in education is something that I've really been gravitating towards, because when you have like issues like the school to prison pipeline, and you kind of have to grapple with like, well, how do you close that pipeline, or how do we continue to live and move through and find careers in the state of our country and its systems of oppression, and find solutions to like combat those things. And I feel like restorative justice has given me a lot of hope to kind of chip a little bit. And that's kind of like the whole idea of abolition as well, is just like taking these chipping slowly at these systems of oppression to try and make life livable. Um, and that's kind of where I'm at. So I think the career path that you're on is just is very insightful of like the like you don't really like know careers or jobs, and then you hear careers and jobs and you're just like, I would have never like pictured that before.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Did you say you were majoring in legal studies? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm also a legal studies major. So I did see myself going to law school for a long time. And then when I discovered the field of restorative justice, I had like this realization of like, I really wanted to focus on supporting young people, especially, our minority communities, Black and Brown students, and assisting them in their navigation towards adulthood, specifically for those students that grew up in communities like mine. I grew up in Vallejo, California. It's not too far from Berkeley. And, I was just one of many different students that were on a particular pathway that didn't end, positively, right? And so I think, to your point, what restorative justice, restorative practices provide, especially in a school setting, is alternative ways to repair harm once it's occurred, right? So instead of suspending a student who's done X, Y, and Z, or in some cases expelling them, right, a more appropriate way to really hold accountability and repair harm is by inviting the community together to support this young person, to assist them with their understanding and their efforts towards resolving the issue. And that is more powerful than any punitive response out there, right? I often tell people when I'm doing trainings or talks, especially for those that don't see the value in this, I ask them to describe a situation where they've offended a partner, a family member, whatever, and they describe it. And I ask them, did they apologize and did they mean it? And for the most part, the responses were yes. And then I asked them, how was that for you? And a lot of them said it was tough, right? Either they didn't want to accept responsibility, they were just uncomfortable by it. But the point is, it wasn't easy to do. And once they did it, and once there was some real healing, they were able to move on in a positive direction. Well, that's what restorative justice can provide, right? It's giving people an opportunity to come together and resolve harm, in addition to using these practices to build relationships. So I'll give you another example. I was working in a school, and there was a teacher who had her mind made up on a student, and she thought about him in not the most positive of ways. The student never went to class. The student was always high. The student was just doing whatever he was doing. And it wasn't until we came together and facilitated the conversation that the teacher discovered that the student was actually going through a lot, loss in the family, about to be kicked out of their residence. The brother, is in a situation. So all these things came to light that the teacher had no awareness over. And so the teacher not only developed empathy for the student, but the teacher also realized that her perspective was, it wasn't really her own, right? She was allowing other outside variables to influence the way she was perceiving this young person. So the teacher also had this revelation and expanded her awareness around the students that she was engaging with. So I don't really want to talk too much. I feel like I'm ranting, but is there any other questions or ideas?
I think MJ raised her hand and also Suad. So let's use that order going forward.
Okay, hello. Okay, so I was just gonna talk about because you said who wanted to work with, youth and stuff like that. So kind of like when I started taking this class, like I was also like, oh, I kind of want to go to law school. Well, I'm not sure yet. But like after taking this course, like I kind of currently right now I work at a high school in Oakland. And so I work with a lot of Black and Brown students and I work as a college advisor. And so like I kind of feel like I'm already too late into like as a senior, trying to help them get them to like higher education. So like I kind of want to enter into a school site and kind of help those kids because I have like Zoom meetings right now. Everything's online. And so like kids kind of like talk to me because like I'm a college advisor and like they just like know I'm a college student. So they have more like they could share more stuff with me. And so like I have a lot of Black and Brown students who like kind of tell me what they're going through and like why they didn't have good grades. And kind of like that's what inspired me of like, going into these high schools or even like middle schools and kind of get those kids started into like steering them away from harm and helping them with families and stuff like that. So hopefully in the future I could, work for a school site and kind of like implement these restorative justice practices.
Yeah, definitely. MJ, did I hear you say that you feel like it's too late to try to get some of these students to higher education?
No, okay, so like when I'm working with the students, like they already like I have like I'm like going through their grades because like that's part of my job. So I have to check their GPAs. And so like my students tell me they're like, oh, I have like a 1.3 or a 2
Gotcha.
point. And so like for me, I feel like I'm like, I wish I could have met you sooner and we could have like worked on this. But like I still give my students a lot of options. But that's why I'm like, as a college advisor for seniors, I kind of feel like I want to get to my students sooner. That's why like
Yeah.
maybe like beginning high school, that's what I would like to do instead of like being like at the edge when they're already going to graduate and then they can't really reach out to me anymore.
Yeah, definitely. I will say that, one, if you're just embodying some of the values and the ideas that RJ provides and teaches, like even the stuff that you're taking from this course, for example, as long as you demonstrate some of those principles, even in your interactions, like that's a win, right? And so, working with seniors myself, sometimes it feels like, man, I wish I got to them earlier. Man, I wish I could do something right now. But as long as we're having these open conversations and showing support and also giving some representation, right? Like, we're from these communities, we look like a lot of our students and we're doing X, Y, and Z. Like that's a lot, that's a win. So I definitely hear you and you want to probably get in a little bit sooner and it's possible. And, if you're interested, we could talk about more ways to do that. But I think as long as you're really embodying these principles in your everyday interactions, like you're doing so much right now. Who knows? Maybe in 5 years, one of these seniors that you're working with now might have this idea of like, man, MJ, X, Y, and Z, that's why I'm doing this today. Whether or not it's college, it could be something else, right? And I barely graduated high school myself. So it's like it wasn't the end all be all. Like there's ways to bounce back for sure. Any other I thought there was one more person maybe.
Yeah, I currently work as a student coordinator to mentor Black and Brown students across California with their UC applications. And so like in terms of restorative justice and supporting like the recruitment and retention of other Black and Brown students, I know that you mentioned authenticity and building relationships and how that can be kind of hard over Zoom. I was wondering if you had any advice as to how to engage with students once you do build a relationship and they do open up to you, and some of the things that they tell you may be like very heavy, or like, for example, I had one of my students tell me that they witnessed a drug overdose of a parent. And so when it comes to like giving support to students, how do you go about that through restorative justice practices? I know that in moments like that, there may not be a perfect or a right thing to say to students, But from your perspective and through your like lived experience, what would you suggest doing when going about supporting those students?
Yeah, that's always an interesting one, right? Because sometimes students share with us things that are very deep and personal. Sometimes there are things that raises some concern, right? So working in education through K to 12, we are mandated reporters, and certain things, we do have to bump up and report them, and that often entails getting additional folks involved, whether it's police or CPS and those agencies. But what I will say is, if a student is confiding in you and talking about some really heavy things, as long as it perhaps isn't one of those things that force you to report them, I think what I've done is I've held that, and I've always circled back and said, hey, what you're telling me is I appreciate it. It's very true. And would you be willing to talk to someone else, like not a counselor, but a mental health counselor, perhaps? It depends on what the situation is, because sometimes I just want to let the student know that there are other folks that are more trained than I am to help support and process long term. Like, I never want a student to say, I just witnessed my friend get shot and murdered, and then I say, okay, I gotta go to another meeting, right? So what I've done preemptively is identify a team. So I already know who my mental health counselor is. I already know who my general ed counselors are. I already know who my student allies are. And I have that network, and I am able to either support that student in transitioning over to receiving additional supports, or at the very least, I'm still able to hold a lot of that information. So I will say for myself, given that I've done this for many years, I've been very fortunate to be able to hold a lot of that emotional labor for our students, and I've been able to support them and navigate, the different issues and obstacles around that. But for someone who's just starting out and may not necessarily know what to do with certain information, try to identify a support network on site with your team ahead of time and discuss ways in which you can support one another for when these things do come up. I hope that answers your question.
It did. Thank you.
All right. Well, I think we have about 5 or so more minutes before my buddy Jonathan's going to take us further. But if there's any other thoughts, comments, questions, I'm happy, if the professor wants to link emails, we can share more stories and some ideas and strategies, or even just networking, because we're always hiring. If you need a job after school or after college, sorry, or if you just want more exposure to the field. Cool. All right. Oh, I saw a hand. Eric.
Yeah, so I had like a comment and then also a question. So like MJ, when you were like talking about like, oh, how do we like tell high school seniors like, since it's like too late, like their GPA isn't great, like what do we tell them afterward? Like I totally like understand that sentiment. And like I think that like since I am like a transfer student, like I think about the ways that like community college has helped so many people like who have gone through like those exact like circumstances. And I know that like I was very hesitant to like go to community college. And so like I was but despite that, like I'm at Berkeley right now because of that. So like that's like something that I think is like motivating probably for someone to hear, like knowing that there are people that transfer to these higher institutions through that route. So I just wanted to say that if you like ever want like advice to like give to students in case you're like, oh no, like it's too late, but like it's like never really too late because they can always like come back from that. And like if they're like, yeah, but anyway. And then I also had a question more for Jose. So during like some of the readings that we had assigned for this week, they talked about like teacher apprehension to like doing like restorative justice circles and stuff like that. Because I know that like one of the examples was a teacher who was like, oh, can you restore this kid, like, or something like that, as if like it was like punishment, or whatever. And so I just like my main question is just like, how do you like handle that? And I don't know, is there any way that like, I don't know, like I know that another issue that was faced was like some teachers just like couldn't handle restorative justice in practice, and so they just like moved to different school districts. So like, how do you deal with that? What are other options for that? Yeah.
Yeah, when you said, can we restore this kid? It's funny. For the longest time, people called me RJ, and they're like, Mr. RJ, can you RJ this thing? And I think Jonathan's had that experience too. And it's just, it's funny when that happens. You just made me remember that. I'll also say that I'm a transfer student myself. So definitely, community college works out for a lot of us. So when we're thinking about working with schools and a staff that may not be wholeheartedly invested or open to the idea of RJ implementation, different organizations will tell you on how and where to start, right? For the longest time, people would just jump right into providing response to harm processes. So when we're thinking about circles of repair, circles of accountability, the response to harm practices, a lot of places will start with those things, and that's what leads to resistance and apprehension from the staff side, because we're talking about a whole paradigm shift, right? We're talking about a whole new understanding and awareness of what accountability means and what repairing means. So I don't blame a lot of our staff who hesitate with this idea. So in the years that I've done this work, what we've done is, instead of rushing to fixing things, we spend a lot of time front loading on just building relationship. And I'm not even talking at this point necessarily about relationship between teachers and students, right? I'm talking about teacher to teacher. So for example, in a staff meeting, we might utilize community building circles to get the staff familiar with the language and the process with each other, so that gradually over time, their willingness to engage in the same practices with their students increases. So you might have a teacher day one who doesn't want anything to do with RJ, but after being in community with their peers or colleagues, some students here and there, and gradually introducing more and more practices, community building practices in their classrooms, at some point harm is going to occur, and that teacher is going to be willing to engage with that student in repairing that through the use of RJ. So I'm hoping that answers your questions or gives you a better understanding. But in summary, right, we have to walk before we run. And even if a teacher is like, I don't want to do this, that's fine, because I guarantee you that there's going to be a teacher somewhere else in that space that will want to do it. And so you'll want to work with them. We call those early adopters. We're trying to identify teachers or staff that are willing to engage with this work. And through working with them and supporting them on their own practice, over time, it starts demonstrating to other teachers, like, hey, so-and-so is doing this, and something's different. Their kids are happy. Their kids are doing well. I might want to try that out.
Yeah, that answers my question. Thank you so much.
For sure. And like I said, you guys, I'm happy to answer these questions. And if another one comes to your mind later on, just shoot us an email and we can collaborate that way. And yeah, I'm just happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Cool. And if there aren't any more questions, I believe my buddy Jonathan is ready. Actually, you know what? I have one more thing I wanted to ask. So for those of you that are interested in working with schools, and even for those of you that may not, that's fine. But what were some of the incidences of harm that you might have experienced at your respective high school, right? So if you were to think about your high school, what were some of the things that were happening among students and teachers or what have you that caused harm, right? So you could just popcorn out if you have one.
I went to school in Oakland, so a lot of things happened in my school. Like fighting is like a norm. Kids bring guns to school. Actually, kids even fight with teachers, and teachers even fight with students. So I think I went to a pretty messed up school, but it was like a free for all essentially. Like you would always see students and teachers arguing, and sometimes they would even get physical. Students, they always argue. There's so many gang violence, and even like after school, we had an issue where a bunch of students, when they walk home, they would get jumped. So yeah, those are some examples.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. You know, that you just described like my high school experience. I'm sure some other folks here as well have they can relate to some of what you share. So definitely. What else? What other examples of some incidences of harm that you might have experienced, or not you personally, but that happened at your high school?
My high
Jonathan?
school was, oh,
Oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead, Jonathan.
Oh, we had a teacher who actually passed away during class. It was a really crazy experience, and so those students like all got counseling and everything. I didn't really know the teacher very well, but yeah, that was a pretty crazy event.
Right. So thank you, Jonathan. So your example, you know, it does happen, and it's different from maybe some of the things that Daniel has said, but that's still caused harm, right? Whether it was more palatable, like for students in the classroom versus yourself, who may not have known this teacher well, it caused some harm. And you know, I appreciate you sharing, and you know, rest in peace to that person. Caro, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that like for my high school, like um the administration and teachers were pretty much all white. You can count like on one hand like the educators that were teachers of color. And I feel like that we had a lot of, not I feel, but I know that we had a lot of issues with um, microaggressions and racism. And just teachers like felt very comfortable saying really racist things all the time. And it happened in classrooms that my friends were in, and it happened in classrooms that I was in. And it's just there's a lot of audacity out there with white teachers, and they don't realize the harm that they create, and the type of really anti-Black and anti-immigrant ideologies and like ways of thinking that they push onto their students, which you know, some they don't think that they're influential, but they are, and students take that. So
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate you saying that. You know, for, this is just a generalized statement, but for the most part, in schools, the representation that students see in the administration or amongst the teachers is very limited, right? And sometimes we don't realize that every little interaction we have with our kids, it actually is very influential in the long run, right? Like I had a teacher that one day told me when I was younger, wow, you're very articulate for someone like you. And that got to me because what does that mean, right? What does it mean for me to be articulate? What does that mean that I am or am not? And I remember I interpreted that as like, all right, if you want to see me be ignorant, I could be ignorant, and that caused a lot of issues. And then I got suspended, right? So that happens even now with the kids that I work with, right? Teachers say these comments, and you know, for the most part, I give benefit of the doubt. Maybe people don't realize what they're saying. I had another staff member, a white staff member, tell a black girl like that because of her attitude, she was only going to work at McDonald's for the rest of her life. Not that McDonald's is a bad job, but he was implying something there, and that student was hurt by it. She wasn't upset; she was hurt, and through her pain, she responded in the way that she did, and it caused further issues of harm. So yeah, microaggressions, it's real. It happens. Any other examples of incidences of harm that you might have experienced in your high school, MJ?
Okay. So mine is more like policy of like our high school, kind of like how Caro said that there's like a lot of white teachers. So I kind of think I come from a very small like farm town, and most of the kids here are Latinos, or they come from like immigrant parents. And so like kind of like the school had a system where like if you like there was 3 strikes, and if you got those 3 strikes, you would be sent off to like another school within the same town, but it was really small. And like the education there was like really poor, and like the teachers were like really bad. So kind of like in a way for like the white teachers not to deal with at our like original high school, like they would just send all those kids, like if you like passed the 3 strikes, they would like send you out. And so like instead of like helping those kids like get through like whatever their problems, or like, you know, helping them, they would just send them to a school where like all the kids are in the same positions. They're all taking like they're all making bad decisions, and usually like all the kids in the other school would like be like the troublemakers or like the so-called troublemakers, or like they would be like gang affiliated. So like let's say if you were like thrown in there like by small little incidents, now you're going to a school where like a lot of the students have committed like larger like bigger things. And so now that's the crowd that you surround yourself with. So I now that I like put it into perspective and I'm like thinking about it, it was just like really bad and really damaging for like kids who made like little bad choices. And now they get thrown into a school where like the teachers don't care about them, the administrators don't care about them, and like the education overall is like really poor.
I appreciate you sharing that. There's an example of what you just described, not so far from where you guys are at right now. You know, I won't say what school it is, but I'll say it's in the Napa Valley, and their policies are just that. And I was called in to go do some consulting, and when I got there, you had the primary school here was more affluent, you know, white for the majority white students, and then you had these portables that were nothing but Latino kids, and they were the bad kids, and some of them, you know, they've had some serious offenses that they've done, and some not so serious, and they were removed simply for getting to minor arguments and things like that. And so when you see these examples, it is very disheartening. It's concerning, but it's also an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity to figure out a way in which to repair that, you know, educate folks and really support students who find themselves in those situations. The question is how do we do that, right? And restorative practices, you see that I go between restorative practice and restorative justice, and I'm not sure if you guys covered that quite yet, but RJRP, that is one way in which to really facilitate change and empathy and accountability, right? A lot of people think RJ is this soft thing, and it's really not. If you know what you're doing and you know what you're talking about, it's very hard to really have accountability and repair harm. So I leave you guys with that thought. I would like for you guys to, not that it's homework, but continue thinking of the things that you've experienced in your high school. And again, if you're not interested in working in high school, but if you are, thinking of those obstacles and those challenges and asking yourselves, perhaps in what ways or what supports you would need to resolve some of those challenges so that you can implement RJ effectively. Thank you guys. Appreciate your time. And I'm going to pass it over to Jonathan, or I guess Julie.
Oh, I just want to say thanks so much, Eddie. Thanks for being here. And yeah, we can connect students with you. It sounds like some students would like to connect and find out more about how to get into your realm. So yeah.
Appreciate it, guys.
Have a good rest of the day.
All right. Bye, guys.
Yeah, hey, as you heard, Jose and I both work in high schools. And so the other part of the question was, what do you, or are you hearing, what do you hear that's going on now as far as conflicts in high schools that weren't going on maybe when you were in high school? Has it gotten worse through what you hear, or is it the same, or has it gotten better from your high school experience?
Personally, in my high school, it got much worse. Um, like when I went, it was strictly focused on academics, and they kind of lost their touch and like focus on academics. So now it's just like it's just a school where people come, and it's really bad. Like students just like they sell drugs in the bathroom. Kids are getting pregnant. Not many resources for the students. Like when I first was in high school, we had zero sports. There was no clubs when I first came into high school until students themselves had to contact different organizations and start clubs. So my school had no resources for the students at all, but at least you had faculty that cared. But I think more so now they just like rotate teachers so much because they don't know how to deal with students, and the students don't have any consistency, so they're not learning and they're just doing whatever they want on their own time.
So in your case, it actually got worse. What you're hearing about things that are going on at the high school now that weren't going on when you were there.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyone else? What do you hear about, or do you hear about anything? Um, it could also be on the news, too.
Um, for my high school, I heard that like funding for AP classes was cut by a lot. Like one of the teachers that I stayed in contact with said that they couldn't teach AP anymore because funding and also interest just dropped a lot. And at my school, if you went to like CP classes versus AP classes, it was very divisive in terms of like where you'd go to college and afterwards. So that's kind of like a big deal for like the future success of students.
Eric, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, so at my high school, our high school mascot was the Indian. And so there's been like after like a little bit after COVID started, like people started protesting against that, like alongside with like the Black Lives Matter protests and stuff like that. And so now I think I just saw today that they were kind of like pushing aside the issue before, but now they're like trying to change it. And they're like asking of like faculty and like student opinions on whether or not it should be changed. Um, and yeah, that's how it's changed.
What's that? Suat? South?
Suad.
Suat. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that it's actually gotten worse at my high school as well, or at least stayed the same. I can remember that when I was in high school, my principal was a lot like more comfortable around about disclosing things to me because my brother had previously went to the high school, and although he got into a lot of trouble, he was more charismatic. So like they were they didn't punish him as much as they would have other students. So when I came to the high school, they recognized my last name and were like kind of looked out for me, which they wouldn't do for other students. And I also like experienced a lot of like last classes. Like I was a part of the last like theater class and the last econ class because they both got cut. And like I remember there being a lot of like gang violence and things like that. And my little sister now currently goes to that high school. And when she got in trouble, the principal had called me, and she was telling me some like things that my little sister had said, and I can remember that I had to call her out because she was explaining sentences that she had used against another student, and she was blocking out cuss words, like even minor cuss words, but she said the N word, and I had to speak to her about how that was out of line, and that she was a principal. Overlooking a lot of Black students, and the fact that she would use that word but not use cuss words was just not okay. And like she responded to me, but like, oh, it has an A at the end and things like that. So she was definitely a lot out of touch. And I can remember when I was in high school, as I said, she was very comfortable with me, and they had a very close relationship with the San Diego Police Department, and we had a student juvenile facility literally down the street. And I remember her saying to me one day, because she had to call the cops on a student, that like she didn't care if a student was giving her trouble. She said, and I can like remember, let them take them. And so I don't really think that it's gotten better at all.
Thank you. Caro?
Yeah, I just
I really reacted to that, and I just feel like administrators and teachers have a lot of audacity, and really have a very strong like power trip sometimes, but which kind of relates to what like I wanted to share in my high school. I know that when same year that I graduated in 2018, there was an incident where I think a fight had broken out. My school has I think they're called SROs, school resource officers. Um, and when I left, when I was there, they didn't have an office. But when I left, they actually got an office inside the administration building. So the officer had his own office with his name on the door and everything. Which is just crazy that they would allocate a space to him. And a fight had broken out, and the I don't know if it was the same SRO from that office or if it was another one. There was always like cops on campus, and essentially what ended up happening is the officer tried breaking out the fight or something like that, and he ended up pinning the student. It was a black boy to the ground, and he pulled his gun out and he put it in his face. And there was photos of that. There was a video of it. It was on the news. The local news made the students look like they were the ones that were being reckless, and that they deserved that. And before that altercation had happened, he was hitting students with his baton, or at least attempting to. And I think what happened between the student and the officer was that he took the baton away, and then that's when he pulled his gun out on the student. And I remember seeing it on Twitter. I think I saw it on Twitter for the first time, and it just really like shocked me, because like that was the high school that I went to. I experienced my own things in at that high school, and I had mentioned previously like there was just a lot of issues with racism, and I remember just being really shocked by it. And as an effect of that, or as cause of that, it kind of motivated me and another former student. Her name's Lola. And we created the Students for Police Free Campuses. And right now we're working with other students who went to our high school and had issues with the SROs, or just things that they saw, or just people who didn't have any issues at all, but believe that we deserve to have campuses free of police. And I kind of wanted to take the opportunity to just kind of ask if anyone has any insight, or yourself, about how to kind of stay strong. I mean, we formally created this last summer in 2020. And we're working really hard, but we're not getting paid, and we try and meet weekly, but we've yet to meet with our district and to show them our proposal. But that's kind of what we're trying to do now.
Wow, riveting. Mm, mm. Yeah, what I'd say is that, you know, um, one thing about the work that I do in conjunction with the work that Jose does as well is our work is work there where we are this is new, and this is a new and emerging field of study and also of practice. What are you talking about, John? Talking about the work that we do. So with that comes all of these. I wouldn't call them growing pains, but there's definitely, obviously, a need, and with that need comes the difference between doing something without a structure supporting it, and doing something with a structure supporting it. And so it also is worked where we attempt to, at our best, to be multi-partial. What does that mean? That means if you need to know the difference between a mediator and what it is that we do or what it is that I do, is in mediation, you are a neutral third party, non-participant. In the work that we do, you are a multi-partial participant, active participant in the process. And so sometimes people need to know the difference between what it is we do, or restorative process, restorative practices, and also mediation. Within knowing that, for you, Caro, and the work that you're attempting to do, it's important that, and I know you already know this, but to be consistent. And it also sounds like you need to have space where there's a dialogue that needs to happen also. And the reason I say that is because I also work in a high school where there are school resource officers. And the way that I work with those officers, those particular ones who are assigned to our site, is in that, as I explained, I choose to work not necessarily with them, but more so not a call out, but a call in. So, and I can choose to have whatever kind of relationship I want to have with them. I have the autonomy to say, police, I'm not dealing with you. I don't want to deal with you. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want nothing to do with you. I could do that easily because people who worked with me prior to me did that. But for me, it's more important that I take the time to introduce them to the work that I do, why the work that I do is important, and also to invite them into the work that I do, to be in interface with the youth that I work with. And sometimes this is a very, as you can probably imagine, a very tense situation where there's some youth who don't want anything to do with the police officer at all. However, I can tell you from processes that I have held, where in the best of those processes, I have seen the police officer, women and men, become people in that room. And that's kind of what I look for, working with the police. They're people behind those suits. And if you can get to the person behind the suit, if you can get that trust, and they trust you and you trust them, you can get there, and different things start to happen. I've seen this in rooms where the police were in circle, and I'm talking about circle now, with youth who, again, had a relationship with the officer. These are two Black people, Black youth and Black police officer. Eric, who you saw there, a master at circle keeping, was holding the circle. The young man in the circle, and I can share this with you because they have a movie that they have out and they're touring the country with their movie. It's called Circles. You should see it. It's a wonderful movie. Where Eric, his son, is in the circle, and the circle is about his son. The police officer who is the school resource officer at the school, I'll share with you just a piece of what he says, which was more or less something to the fact that I had it wrong with you. I had you pegged like this. That was because of the kind of relationship that they had prior to coming to Circle, and the kind of relationship that they had after the Circle, where you have a youth who feels like he has to protect himself, who feels like he has to be hard, who feels like he has to put on these kinds of faces and things to be seen like that. That's how I want you to see me. That's what I want you to pick up. That I don't want nothing to do with you. And the police officer picked it up pretty loud and clear, like, you know. But in the Circle, they got to talk about that. And the officer got to let well, I wouldn't say let his guard down. I would just say take off his suit. And I've seen it happen several times where the suit is really on. They've got the suit on, they got the bulletproof vest on, they've got the guns on. But I can tell you that I have seen all of that fade away in this process. Does it happen every time? No, it doesn't happen every time, because what this process and some of these processes call for is your heart. If you can't put your heart in there, this is not going to really work for you, the circle. And so what the circle calls for is listening with your heart and also sharing from your heart. And you're going to know, and they're going to know, and everybody's going to know. And even the youth knew, where I had police officers in circle who they've never felt like this before themselves. Look, I want to talk to this youth right now. Let me turn our chairs together. I want to talk to you about something, about you're growing up and you're going to be a man. And took the time. We're in circle right now, but the police officer wanted to take some time to really, really hammer home a connection that he was feeling with this youth. So, while it might be hard to hear what it is you're going to hear, that is part of the work that we do also. And we talk about that, where the real magic comes from sitting in rooms with people who you don't agree with, who you don't have the same line with. But I'm trying to understand why you feel the way you do, or why you did the way you do, which brings me to the story, one of the stories that I wanted to share with you, which was some work that I did with a particular high school. And well, we're going to just say a particular high school. I should probably say that. At the high school, what had happened, and this also goes along the line of something that we were just talking about, which is race, culture, and ethnicity. Something that I see now that I did not see before, of course, when I was in high school, is this social media platforms, and how to navigate those territories. However, that being the case, the work was, or the incident was, that some youth, one particular youth, created a page. On the page was pictures of particular African American and mixed students at the high school, with nooses burned around their necks and on fire, burning. Also on the page was KKK starter packs. And so this went out as a page to friends. So friends liked and also followed the post. I don't know how the school got wind of it, but to make a very long and arduous story kind of short, the work that I did was my particular task, one of them in this, was to sit and to prep the students who had liked and followed the page. I say this to you to say that, what is it about me? And some of the things have already been mentioned earlier when we talked about in the role of facilitator. In this role, you have to know, I have to know what my hooks and what my triggers are. And I have to be very careful about those, because if I put myself into a situation, it could be a situation that I get triggered in, and then nothing gets done, and I run away triggered, and everybody runs away triggered, and just a bad situation all around. So that being the case, I was able to sit with those youth and listen to why they felt like they needed to like and follow the page. So I didn't get an opportunity to sit with the person who actually created the page, but these were people who liked and followed it. it's kind of split the student body. But some of the things I want to share with you is that there was a major protest going on when we were going to have the circle, and the students were protesting. And so they were walking out of class, and there were a bunch of students in the hallway, and they were outside. And at one point, when we were in this room, sequestered in this room, we could look outside. And the students who were in the room, who I was sitting with, looked outside, and they saw some students out there, and they said, "Hey, whoa, what's he doing out? He's out there." What that basically means was he who was out there holding up a flag and chanting and rah, rah, rah with the crowd out there, he actually was supposed to be in the room with the crowd who, I don't know if he liked or followed the page, but the people in the room seemed to know him very well, and that he was in the wrong section there. Just lets you know that how convoluted sometimes it can be in high schools. This, got blown way out of proportion. And I say that because, there's punitive things that were happening. We were unaware of some of the punitive things that were happening already. This is where schools are reaching for something. Let's get a cap on this. Let's get a top on this before it blows up. Eddie and I, Jose and I have both had experiences where the media is involved and where schools are trying to not say a whole lot about what's going on campus for real. Needless to say, the students who liked and followed the page pretty much were set on dark humor. And so the dark humor that we're seeing now in high schools is really almost a cruel to humanity kind of humor. And a lot of the things that I deal with are along that lines of we were just joking and it was a joke. It's how we joke, and it's called dark humor. And so I while we're all probably very aware of that, what we deal with is the harm or the fallout of those things. The second story that I'll share with you is a story that recently happened where some seniors wrote on a car that they were in for the car parade that the parents had planned in Mandarin characters, "We don't like Black people." And so, again, my task as the facilitator at the high school is to sometimes be called in to help, sort out these types of incidences. And so part of it was, sitting with the young men and their families, of course, who had done that. They got in their car. One young man showed up. He wrote it on the car in Mandarin characters, looked it up on his phone. The reason I know that is because at our process, I had him write it on the board for us. And with Mandarin, some of you may be aware, there's a stroke order, and you don't just draw them like, you could just draw, but there's actually a stroke order. So it's kind of what I'm looking for is in prep is whether this student knew the stroke order or they really knew what they were doing. So I saw him take out the phone and just kind of trace it and draw it up on the board. So yeah, he could have just made it like that, but it just told me that he didn't know the stroke order. So they really didn't know, but they knew what they wanted it to say, and they knew what they were saying. So as they took off into the parade and started with their car, they didn't get too far into the parade where somebody had taken, because of social media and the way things travel now, my thoughts, this was never clarified, but I think that they thought that they could probably get away with it. Nobody would read this. Nobody would understand what we're saying. Unfortunately, people were filming, people took pictures, or fortunately, whatever. People deciphered it, and before they could get even halfway into the parade, they were getting death threats. They stopped in midway in the parade somewhere. They scrubbed it off the car. Their families were getting death threats. The school had to move their families out of their homes into safe houses for a little while. And so this is some of the impact of a decision that was made. And you know, I was young once. I had done stupid things too, you know, and I'm not gonna say you guys did. You guys probably ate perfect angels, but I know I did dumb things. But there was a big impact all the way through the community. This impacted the community. And at the end of it was we were just joking. And this is the way we joke. And this is the way we were having fun throughout our time at the school. We learned to say it in Mandarin from a student who spoke Mandarin, taught us how to say this. And so we would just say it to each other all the time. Even though they were from families of color, some of them even had Black people in their families, felt like this was something that they could joke about. And then they took it to that level and actually wrote it on the car. And then that was the fallout. And so what we did with that was we had a number of circles with the youth, of course, and their families. And then we also invited members of the community in, and the youth also sat with members of the community to also hear the impact, that the greater impact on the community that incident had. And so that's just a couple of things, sort of maybe tip of the iceberg stuff that we're dealing with. Of course, we deal with a lot of relationship things. And the other thing I wanted to share with you is I get a wonderful opportunity to also work with a group of students. And so the district that I work for is interested in training and making sure students understand what restorative justice is and what restorative justice practices are. And so part of what I do is I support a student program. I call it a project right now. It's going through some phases. It seems like they want to make it a club automatically already, but we're going to put that out to the students and see if that's something that they want to do. But I have a group of students who also hold community, well, they're trained, I train them, and then they hold community building circles at the high school. They also help out with conflict resolution among students. And they haven't done anything with the adults yet. Again, you got to take this in baby steps. You know, the adults they can't really handle what I'm dealing with. You know, can you deal with this, Mr. Riley? You know, so yeah, but I think the students are actually amazing, and they can handle anything with regards to restorative. In fact, they're so overqualified that they all just want to really solve the problem for the students. And the hardest thing for me and them is to get them to just back up a little bit, let them solve the problem. You know, let them solve it. Give them these questions and then give them the air to do it. Give them the space to solve it and let them do it. That's the hardest part about that work. Some of the work I'll also mention is with the Alameda County District Attorney's Office. I mentioned just a little bit about that earlier on with the police. The reason we were interfacing with the police at that time, and I believe also currently, is because the way that program is set up, it's for juveniles who commit felonies in Alameda County, lower level felonies. They have an opportunity to get their charges not filed by the court. And so if they complete these programs, this is a program by Community Works West I think they're still located in Oakland right now. But the youth have this opportunity, this golden opportunity to sit with the person or the persons that they harmed in something we call a restorative community conference. You might be familiar with the family group conference, which comes out of the Maori people of New Zealand. It's basically taking that structure, which is a family group conference, and superimposing it on a community and saying, hey, this is a community of people, and we need to have these people in place. So part of that was having law enforcement at the table. The reason law enforcement was there was to actually really just read the charges and talk about extenuating circumstances. You were caught in a stolen car that usually comes with 2 years of probation plus $300,000 fine, whatever it is. That was their job, was to read the charges and at the beginning of the conference. From there, we would go to the person who was harmed, and they would talk about the impact of what happened. Their support would also get a chance to happen or talk. And then also the person or the responsible youth, which is the name we gave the person who committed the harm, because we don't want to use the same language that the punitive system uses. And I'm sure that, or you guys either will or haven't yet get into the differences again between what it is we do and what it is that our current system does and how they interface. And there are places where they interface. This is one of them, where the district attorney of Alameda County actually hands over cases of youth that have committed felonies in Alameda County to this organization. And we then reached out to youth to see if they wanted to be a part of this, them and their families. Once they signed up, they were a part of it. Then we went through a little prep phase where we talked about what happened and how they felt like what they wanted to do. I would then contact the actual victim of the harm and see if they wanted to also come in and be involved in this. We had a lot of victims be involved, and I can tell you one of the number one things is victims would get involved in that had their cars stolen and things stolen out of their car, and they would want their stuff, they would want money. This happened on a number of occasions, but when we get into process, they find out that well, it's something that comes to them. It's nothing that comes to me. It's nothing that's done to them. The process allows for change to happen. And so sometimes in that process, oftentimes in that process, the person who was harmed would have a change, and they would just want that person to go to school, be on time, and do good things and not get caught up in this kind of stuff anymore. What can you do to do that? And so we'd have to narrow it down to some actual things that person could do to repair that harm with that person. But the overarching thing was, hey, I don't want any of that stuff back or the money and anything like that. I just want you to do good and make better decisions. That was at the core of it. But of course, I had to have, again, concrete things that they could do, that I could follow, that I could monitor, that they could complete. And then I could send back a note to the DA's office to say, hey, Junior completed his obligations to Community Works West. No charges should be filed in this case. And that was basically it. Sometimes at those conferences, we have counselors. Sometimes we would have professional people, because through talking to the youth, I would find out that, hey, I want to do this. I had a youth who wanted to be a contractor, maybe something he wanted to do. Well, guess what? I got a friend who does that. Yeah, can you come to the conference? Came to the conference. Talked about contracting. They ended up hooking up a little bit, took him on a few jobs and stuff like that. As part of his plan, he rode around with my friend who was a contractor, looking at jobs and stuff like that. So that was part of what we did with youth. We didn't have them go by the side of the road, picking up trash. That was something that we felt like that's not what we want to do here. We want to connect them to actual things that they actually want to do. And so many of the youth that I worked with had actual things, and we'd have actual people at the conference for them to transition. With that, I wanted to mention a couple of films. I wanted to mention a film, definitely mention Eric's film Circles, that you definitely should check out. It's a great film. And then there's a film called Face to Face. It's on Amazon. This is my favorite movie about the conference. So something I've talked about in conference, but this movie, I love this movie so much because this is the actual movie of it's a theatrical movie, so it's not a documentary, but it's if I could have a dream job, this would be it, where this is the job that you do as a conference person, and that's your job, to conference, and so yeah, so that's it. Totally dream job though. And but the movie goes through so many twists and turns, and some people like it, some people don't. People in the industry are working and that. I absolutely love it. I think it's phenomenal. So definitely go see that movie. And this wouldn't be done over without mentioning a resource called Circle Forward, which is a whole school approach to a restorative justice, to having a restorative school, basically, not a program, not a process, but whole school restorative justice implementation. Circle Forward. Also, big shout out to Sandra there. You probably thought I was going to forget you. Sandra's doing so much great work with Circles for Social Change, our organization. Really appreciate you. Really appreciate the work you're doing. Hope we can hire you. You know what I'm saying? Really make this thing official. But we just really appreciate the work she's doing for us. I can't say enough about that. So the way I got to this work was I would say that the work I guess I didn't get to this work like that. It kind of got to me some kind of way. Like I didn't, but I think just for me personally, just working with students in middle school, needing something a little bit more dynamic, got an opportunity to go to a training in restorative justice put on by RJOY, which is absolutely one of the most phenomenal organizations here in Oakland doing this work. Got an opportunity to sit with Miss Fania Davis, who's a giant in this industry. Fania actually brought this work to Oakland, and also Rita Alfred, who's also just, these are the people's whose shoulders that I stand on with this work. They're just people who I hold in very high esteem. And so I got an opportunity to sit with them and train with them for a couple of days. And I got to be honest with you, coming out of that training, I didn't know anything about restorative justice. I didn't know what it was, and it wasn't, and that was okay with me. It was that somehow I'm just the kind of person that was okay, because what I had experienced, the things that we did in those 2 days were the things that I had. And those were the things that I took with me, were the experiences that I had. And so I brought those experiences right back into a middle school. The next week, I'm talking, I went to a training on Saturday and Sunday. Monday, I was back at my middle school, lighting the sage, lighting a candle in the center, passing around a talking piece. This is how we're going to do this. The kids were pretending like they're smoking weed, and they were just having a ball. It was in middle school. We had a ball though. And I needed something really dynamic, like a circle, because we're having issues between the boys and the girls. And this was a small middle school, West Oakland Middle School at the time. And we just needed something more dynamic than mediation, which is one of my jobs at that time, was training students to peer mediate disputes between each other. Well, we had like groups of students, and we needed circle. So I got exposed to it at West Oakland Middle School by Mr. Davis there at West Oakland Middle School. He just let me come into a couple of circles that he had going on. Oh, wow, like this, like that. And then I heard about a training, and I knew the person at our school wasn't going to go. So I was going to go in and take that spot, And so I just showed up, and they let me come in, and I wouldn't say the rest is history, but I've definitely been doing it since then. And we continue to work on trying to stay on the cutting edge, working with our language. And another thing that I work on is I want to go back to the structure of things and how important it is to have a structure. And I know that sometimes some of the talk that I hear now is that, hey, let's get in a circle. Hey, let's just do it. Hey, let's do it like that. Don't worry about it. Let's just pass it around. And certainly you can do that. I would caution against it, only because you just don't get the outcome that you're not using the circle to really get that outcome that you really could get when you go in with a structure. And just because you have a structure doesn't mean that you have to stick to it, but you do need to start with the structure and know what that is, and maybe need to come back to it sometimes too. And again, I wanted to mention, the reason I say this is because all of us watch movies, at least most of us do, and TV shows and things like that. And it's those movies that make you cry or make you laugh, where the actor really takes that script and they make it theirs. Eric really took a script and he made it his, and people don't even know that he has a script there. And so that's why we pull out those little things sometimes, say, hey, check this out, because you think it's like this and you might think it's like that, but this guy actually has a plan going into this thing. And when you have that plan going in and that circle works out like it works out, it's magical and it's amazing. So I can't say enough about having the structure, and also our restorative justice needs structure to stand on as well. We need powerful things behind us. And I know people go, oh, well, we want to work this outside of the structure. Okay, well, you go ahead and do that. That's fine. I am going to try to work towards making sure that this is the first thing that you do in a school. It's written in the laws of the school, the bylaws, that restorative justice in the structure is the first thing that you do. It's not the last thing you do. It's not something that you might do. It's written right there. You will do an RJ process first. Then all this other stuff comes into play too. But that's what I sort of work towards and push towards, is the structure of it actually being written on a stone or whatever it is, that restorative justice is the first thing we do, and not the last or the sometimes thing that we do. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Jonathan. That was amazing. A lot there. And I know we just have 3 minutes, but I wonder if people want to comment or ask a quick question just to finish us out. If there's something really strong on your mind from what Jonathan has talked about.
Jonathan, do you think that restorative justice in schools can be a way to push out SROs?
And so I say, this is recorded, and I do have SRO friends, because the officers that I worked with, they really, and we became, there's this thing going, there just is. It was me who was like, okay, I'm gonna do something else. I do something else. I say, come into our circle. Come and work with us. Yeah, he's doing this. Would you like to meet with? Okay, we can do it and when they take the time and the opportunity to do that, that's when things happen. But I will say yes, because but because the practice of restorative justice has to be thorough throughout the school, all the way to the discipline. That's what I'm saying. When it's structurally written in discipline, that the only reason that you're going to have a restorative practice is if you have a restorative coordinator or a restorative justice facilitator or somebody who's really going to hold that and be separate from the principal, the vice principal. Can they do it? They certainly can. Is it difficult to change those hats, to wear different hats? It's super difficult. I don't like doing it. I like being in the school. I'm the RJ. I'm RJ when I hit the set. I'm nothing else. There's the restorative justice guy right there. And sometimes I've told stories where I had to back him up a little bit and say, hey, Mr. Bradley, should we kick him out? The circle didn't work. He didn't want to do it. Should we kick him out? Hey guys, I'm the restorative guy here. Y'all got to make that decision. If y'all sending people home and kicking them out, that's the decision that you making. I ain't got nothing to do with that. You want circles? You want restorative conversations? You want COSAs? I got you all day long. Work or don't work? I don't even use those words. It always works for me. Information always gets shared. So yes, I do believe that with a consistent restorative justice approach, restorative discipline approach, yes, training students to also hold this and having students at your school be those coordinators, be those we call them ambassadors. That's what they become. It was me going back and forth with the principal. I like to be a little bit more formal. I liked calling them facilitators. I like calling them student RJ facilitators. She wanted ambassadors. That's a little bit up there, so we're going to go ahead and go with the ambassadors because we're working together with this thing. She's really the dean over discipline. This is new for her. So, but she's come to it. We were working together. And yes, you can. But it has to be structured throughout the school, and it'll be magical. And there are schools that have RJ at their core and are structured through, some of them have done this through MTSS, the multi-tiered system of support, which is something that's taking over, sort of going into schools, looking at all the things that are going on in schools, and really having RJ sort of at the core of everything that everybody's doing at the school, among other things. But I do believe, yes, it can. But work with them first. Get them while they're there. Get them to come into a circle. Get them to come and talk to you on your terms and the things that you do. Hire one of us. You can hire Circles for Social Change to come in and hold this circle of dialogue. I see other people laughing. I'm not laughing. We in this to get that, hey, try to make a little money too. Make a shameless plug for my organization. You're doggone right. We could hold that dialogue with you guys. We could do that. We could support you in doing that. Love to do that.
Do y'all travel? Because
we will. Where are you from? Spain?
No, but from Southern California.
Oh, that ain't nowhere. No, here we go down there. Shoot.
But I appreciate, Kato, you sticking with it and getting your answer. And also I would add that, this work could take years. So what Jonathan's saying about setting up the structure, it's a long-term mission. And then through that, at some certain point, those SROs can be gone. I think that can definitely happen.
Yeah. Let me just mention too quickly, Caro, it's about cooking a roast. Or, and you might be a vegetarian, but sometimes you got to cook a roast. People, if you know people who cook roasted for, whatever. But anyways, the roast and the brisket are gonna take the longest. You cooking a hamburger and stuff like that, okay, it's over and done with a couple flips, you're done. Right now, you are cooking a brisket. You cooking a roast. And when I go in with that mindset, I'm not gonna get it all done right now. And then I got 6 hours to let this thing smoke. And boy, is it gonna be good when it comes off the grill. Yeah.
Speaking of dinner, okay, thank you so much, Jonathan. Thanks everybody for being so engaged today, and I will follow up on all the different, details that I mentioned earlier. So I'll be doing that and sending out some announcements. So thanks everybody, and yeah, have a nice evening. Bye.